Okay, good evening everyone. Welcome to the West Central Area Committee. Sorry we're a few minutes late to start. My name is Councillor Rod Cantrell, for those who don't know me, and I'm Chair of West Central Area Committee. And amongst you, scattered amongst you, are your local councillors, and they have nameplates in front of them. So for those who are not aware who your councillors are, you can identify them by their nameplates. And as we go through the meeting, I think when the councillors first talk, if you could just say who you are and which ward you're from, that would be great. Just in terms of any issues, you can identify the exit over there, and there is tea and coffee and biscuits for people during the course of the meeting. So we now move to the agenda. Any apologies?
We have apologies from Councillor Ratcliffe and Sergeant Wood.
Okay, that's great.
Inspector Johnson as well.
Okay, that's great, thanks. And for councillors present, does anyone have any comments on the minutes from the September and the December meeting at all? Councillor Gillespie.
So I should introduce myself as well. Councillor Oscar Gillespie, City Councillor for Margaret Ward. The talk that Councillor Vick had about parking on Midsummer Common was minuted. There were due to be some more notes about that circulated.
Yeah, we've got some hard copies, so I think what we'll do is when we come up to matters and actions, we'll circulate them and Councillor Vick can just give us an update.
Great, okay, thanks.
Any other comments on the minutes? No? Okay, so we'll duly move on. Matters and actions arising from the minutes. Any key matters or actions arising that people would like to cover? I know the point on parking on Midsummer Common. I don't know, Councillor Vick, whether you want to raise that, and we'll circulate the notes that were made at that minute. That meeting, sorry.
Hello. Yes, Tim Vick, Councillor for Market Ward. Claire is just circulating the notes of the meeting that took place at the end of October with representatives of the Brunswick and North Kite Residents Association and Friends of Midsummer Common about the long-standing problem of parking and driving on the common. This was an informal meeting, so there are any notes, but give an idea of where we got to. The intention on my part is to call that group again together because there were a number of actions that were agreed then, which I personally don't know whether they were done or not done, and I think it would be important for the group to come together and review that, and possibly then report back again to this committee where the issue was raised, I think, a few meetings ago.
Okay. Any other comments on that particular item?
Can I ask if the central issue of the lockhouse becoming a cafe has also been picked up? There's a planning application currently in. There's a current planning application published about a week or two ago for the lockhouse budget is locked to become a cafe. Goodness knows how it's going to be serviced. Indeed, the County Council have asked the question and there's no answer in the application. But if they were allowed to use the cars on the common, that would magnify this problem twofold.
Okay, could that be incorporated in?
Chair, I think it has not been covered because it was not known at the time of the meeting in October. But clearly there are some lessons from the common experience that could be transferred. But there are probably some different stakeholder groups who would want to be involved in addressing that, and perhaps we could contact them about talking about it. But I think possibly we need to understand how far this application is going to run and focus on it.
Why don't we'll take that away and make sure that those stakeholder groups are aware of the types of issues and the experiences on Midsummer Common. Any other matters or actions arising that anyone would like to raise? Mr. Taylor.
Yeah, last time I mentioned that the Jesus Green Association notice board was well out of date. I've checked this evening on my way here and it's still got material on it that's over a year out of date. The reason I think that's particularly important is that it's a public asset. The Jesus Green Association are actually holding an open annual general meeting soon. They're not even advertising that on the notice board. And if councillors took the notice board back and made it available to the public, we could advertise things like the planning application, which is at the cafe opposite. We could advertise this meeting as well.
Okay, so we'll follow up with that and see if we can track someone down in Jesus Green Residents Association. Councillor Nsinga.
It's a different point. Sorry, this is a different point. It's on the actions on the following up on parking on the land outside Trinity College, which it said was due to cease on the 31st of January, and in fact is still continuing, so I will chase that. There's still parking, I think. Well,
through the chair.
Colin says that they've finished the work.
Through the chair, I was going to bring that up. They were parking last Friday. Last Friday they were parking on there, so they're in breach of a planning application, and we should enforce, as we do like normal people. So we should enforce. But you'll take that up directly, yes? And then the final point I had, just a point of information, as a result of lots of people who were here in the previous meeting, which weren't residents really of West Central, but were residents from Milton Road, with some residents from Histon Road, who are part of West Central. There was a very successful North Area Committee, special North Area Committee last week with 300, I think, people. I think people were literally standing outside, so it's a very topical issue, some of the City Deal projects that are going through at the moment. So, just by way of information.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
point 9, Councillor Crenshaw requested the matter of Walking Road allotments to be given to officers to respond.
Yeah.
An action point.
You can follow up with that. I think it was the point regarding access, wasn't it? And I think there's been a discussion and a meeting.
No, it's issue about common land registration.
Oh, right, okay. I'm just looking at the back to Dave.
The issue we met about was the metro reinstatement to the rear. We met with Susan Stobbs and Dick Baxter and the Synagogue and agreed the reinstatement there on site, and that was all resolved. The ongoing issue of the registration and the access is continuing. That's with county as we previously discussed.
It's not about access, it's about the registration of the land as common land, which it wasn't done previously in history. So it's all there in the previous minutes. So there was an action point.
Yeah.
For officers to respond, to be brought back to commission as a future agenda item if necessary.
I think
the issue of registration as common land. That's what it's.
Alistair, did you have some comments on that as well?
Yeah, I have responded direct to Susan regarding the item on the agenda which related to the Auckland Road allotments. And I set out to Susan what the difference was between statutory and non-statutory allotment provision were, and that the Auckland Road was set out for allotments, therefore has a statutory function, a statutory role, and therefore is afforded much the same protection as the 1965 Commons Act. So if there was to be a disposal, it would have to be dealt with through the Secretary of State, much the same as it would with the common land.
So it doesn't need to be brought back to committee.
Okay, good. So unless there's any other major issues or matters arising, we will move on to declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest? No? If any of the councillors become aware during the course of the meeting, if they could just identify themselves in relation to that. So turning now to the open forum, we do have some questions that have been submitted, and I will start with Jane Rossiter Smith, and it's in relation to the agreement between the City of Cambridge and the North Pole.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
Ice skating.
Yeah. Sorry.
It's not a broadening out of the City Deal arrangements. Councillor Reid.
So I just want to say I've got an interest to declare because I'm a trustee of the CLIC, which is the proposed new high street on Newmarket Road. So it has links with the
help us this last week as well.
Okay, so I'll read the question in full. Is the agreement between the City of Cambridge and the North Pole ice skating in the public domain? What is the financial benefit to the City of the North Pole ice skating? Do you take that question?
I can answer that question. There hasn't been any formal request as yet for the release of the agreement. If there was, I would write to Richard to state to him the intent to release and for him to raise any objections to what may be in that contract or the agreement. Now we have already done that, and Richard has stated that he's happy for that to be released, so it's a little bit of formality. In terms of the financial benefit to the council, those are set out in the schedules in the agreement. And for this year, the financial forecast is not yet set. However, we are on a profit share up to £25,000.
Do you want a follow-up question on that? Can we just get your mic? Is there a mic? There we go. There's one on your table.
Oh, hello, I am Jane. What is the profit share? Is it 50-50 or what is it?
Yeah, it's 50-50 on net. So after all expenses, we get half of whatever's made up to a cap limit of 25,000, and after that we don't get anything.
And when will you know what the profit is for this season?
Yeah, the target date for that is the 28th of February.
And will that be published somewhere, or how can one find it?
That could be, we could publish that, yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
So, Councillor Big and then the gentleman at the back.
Could I ask if the City Council charged a rent for the use of the space on Parker Speaks, and whether that is one of the costs involved?
Okay, we'll take the gentleman at the back and then Alistair can...
Sorry, I just wanted to check also the cost of renovation of Parker Speaks, because it's left in an appalling state. It's going to be out of use effectively for another, say, 3, 4, maybe 6 months. It's an area which is completely unusable, and if that is weighed up against the earnings which the council have earned against the reinstatement costs.
Okay, so the first one is the rent, and then the second one is kind of the amenity value and the loss of amenity value as a result of the condition of the grass.
Answer those questions. In terms of the rent, there's no specific rent paid. It is dealt with through the agreement itself. So the agreement, the Schedule 1, which sets out the fee payable, is in effect the rent. With regards to the amenity value and the reinstatement of the site, yes, it is out of use for a long period. Again, exceptional year, exceptional weather conditions, has made reinstatement particularly difficult. In terms of the loss of the value, yes, there is a loss in terms of using it for recreation and access to recreation. However, I'm also very mindful that we've had over 80,000 people use that space in a 6-week period who've also had recreational value from the same space.
So we'll come back to this item in item 6. So what I'm proposing to do is move on to other questions, but certainly we will come back to this item in item 6. So the next question is from Penny Heath. Penny.
Shall I just,
I wanted to ask about Section 106 money and to do with the little bridge between Grange Road and Burrells Walk by Covets Corner. Part of the West Cambridge development is that they were going to widen that bridge. And in fact, I think somebody rebuilt it and made it narrower. And there's so much footfall and increase in cycles from the West Cambridge site, centre of town. I just wondered how much is in that Section 106 pot, and is the university going to honour that part of their, I think it was 1999 agreement, before they redo the new master plan?
I can answer part of the question. I can't answer the specific point in relation to the bridge, but basically the funding is still there. Over a period of time, the university has been testing the volume of cyclists coming from the West Cambridge side, and that was triggered about 4 or 5 years ago in terms of their obligation to provide a route. There have been various routes proposed, and the most acceptable route to the community so far was one which came out onto Cranmer Road. So actually it was off-road until Cranmer Road. And the problem with that was that a number of colleges owned strips of that route and were not prepared to engage with the university until the outcome of the local plan. So it kind of got stopped at that point. Now, that route would not include going down Burrells Walk, because it would take people along behind Grange Road, down Cranmer Road, and then down Sidgwick Avenue, so that you're entering the historic core along Silver Street. So I'm not sure what the implication will be for replacing the bridge. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that the university have a consultation group about the plans for developing the West Cambridge site. And they're in the process of organising 2 meetings in the near future, one of which will be dedicated to transport. And we will raise this issue again there. We have raised with them before the need to pursue the issue of that cycle path. And I'm sure the City Deal, she said looking at Council Vic, are aware of this previous agreement too, because it's very material that this is just picked up and carried on. Because this is the university due to fund this entirely.
It's quite a cycle sum as well. Councillor Nsinga.
On the more specific point about the bridge itself, when they did the bridge and put the new bridge in, I did check about the way it was designed and whether it would be possible to widen it, and was reassured that it was possible to widen it and that all the ability to widen it is there. I was told at that point that the issues about widening it were unresolved land issues, and I will go back and chase up whether they've got any further with them, because I suspect that just maybe started looking back since. And I think it is the widening of that bridge is a slightly different issue from the rerouting of or the additional cycle capacity that is supposed to be coming along as a result of them hitting that target. So I'll chase that one up as well.
And just a final point on that is that, oddly, although it's a traffic transport related section 106, it's under the obligation of the City Council. It's not actually the county. It's a very odd agreement that's in place, basically. Okay, so I then have one final question, which is from Richard Taylor. I'm not sure I take it here or in item 7. Are you happy to take it in item 7, yeah. Richard? Yeah. Okay, so we'll take it when we have the police and safe and neighbourhood item. Were there any other questions?
I put a question in.
I don't seem to have it. Oh, you slipped one in there, Tom. Okay, so question from Colin Rosenstiel. Can the council look at improving St Andrew Street and Downing Street junction? Would you like to just expand a little?
Can I say that this has been raised within the Cambridge Cycling Campaign, so I'm speaking on behalf of the campaign tonight because nobody else was able to come, in particular from the present committee. A number of members have raised concerns about the signals of that junction and problems for cyclists, particularly turning right into Downing Street, which can be very difficult. The facing of the signals is wrong because just after you get a green to do that manoeuvre or turn left in the other direction in Sussex, in St Andrew Street into Downing Street, all the pedestrians go walking across because the flow out of Downing Street has been stopped and they don't notice the red man in their face. So ever since those signals have been put in, there's been calls for the phasing to be changed so that the pedestrian phase comes after the exit from Downing Street phase. But in addition, there are concerns about the width of the cycle lane with the island at the signals because it's only 0.9 metres wide and bikes are wider, it can be wider than that. And also the whole area is very awkward because the pavement's very narrow by the Building Society and at times it gets very busy with pedestrians. And it's actually been suggested the possibility of 2 pedestrian phases within the crossing cycle be looked at to give pedestrians a better chance. It's not a significant traffic route, except for the exit from the car park and and the buses going south, and that for them, for both of them, the critical junction is the Catholic Church anyway, so delays there aren't a problem. But the question is, will the city and the county councillors here be willing to try and take up the issue with the county city?
Let's see if anyone would like to comment. County Councillor for Market Walk. Ed?
Thank you, Ed Kearns. Well, the short answer is we've already done this. We've already taken it up. The officers, the signals team say that this is a better arrangement. I mean, we can look at it again, but I mean, there is very limited, resource. I can't really stress that enough. We've just gone through the LHI process. We had similar sort of issues, as you know, at the junction of Emmanuel and St Andrew Street, and we were turned down for LHI funding to try and make that junction more safe, because that also is difficult for the complexity, the conflict of pedestrian, cyclist and motorist. And I think actually, Colin, the officers would take sort of issue with your view on the transport network, because there is quite a lot of traffic flow leaving the car parks, and we do get congestion if there isn't that flow. And I think that was part of the reason for changing the signalling. So, I can take it back, but I'm not sure we're going to get a different answer, really.
Is this on this item? Yeah.
As a cyclist who makes that right-hand turn into Downing Street, I can say it's pretty hairy, especially if you're alongside a bus that actually pulls out to overtake a cyclist on the left and nearly knocks you off. Pretty scary stuff, and I do think it does need improvement. And I don't have much confidence in the County Council from what Ed said.
Okay, so perhaps we should take it back.
Can I just make clear that the specific additional concern that hasn't been mentioned in the reply so far is the conflict between cycles and pedestrians. Which is, these are problems that go back to when those signals are installed. I'm not aware that they've been altered.
Councillor Gillespie, do you want to comment on this?
I agree with Colin about that, but also while we're in that area, I'd love to make the reserved cycle space further up St Andrews Street near the pedestrian zone a lot clearer, because I think it's not well demarcated, and it's very common for pedestrians there to step into the road thinking, oh, there's a bus coming, so I'm fine. Yeah. If it was a different colour.
This is near the HSBC bank around there.
Fenton Murray, it's like that area leading up to the...
Okay. So, you had a question? Would you like to?
Yeah.
And then this gentleman here, you had a question as well.
I was shocked and horrified to see the 8-storey block on East Road just being given planning permission after reading the newspaper that I thought it wasn't going to be given planning permission. I'm very concerned about what's going on with planning, and maybe I'd like some comments from councillors. Is the planning system in meltdown in the city?
Anyone would like to volunteer comment? Councillor Beck.
Well, I'm not sure I'm in a position to say that planning's in meltdown, but that was a very disappointing decision. My main concern had been about the absence of the required amount of affordable housing there, which was appeared to be just one of the sins being committed by the application. On that issue, it's clear that the City Council, like other councils, has a struggle to meet its affordable housing targets if developers come along and plead poverty, which is very, very difficult to get at the truth of. The City Council might be able to strain further to challenge, but it is a very, very difficult challenge to make.
What about the issue of building height? I thought there was some sort of restriction on building heights, and that seems to have been thrown out. There was a comment in the newspaper, I know it's a newspaper, but that it was maybe the only issue they could challenge the planning application on, and yet it appears that councillors didn't feel that was, a number of councillors didn't feel that was something they could challenge the building height on, and Councillor Etkin has stated in the newspaper again that this could give rise to 10-storey blocks around this area, Cambridge, and maybe other areas. Any comments?
Can I just... I'd just like to explain that there is now, on major applications, what is, I think is called a recall protocol, which means that if the committee is minded to reject, against the advice of officers, a major application, it goes into cool for a month to give everyone a chance to rethink the situation. And the reason for that is because on a previous notable occasion, the committees made a decision which went to appeal and cost the city £250,000, because the inspector came to the conclusion that the grounds for the city's position were absolutely insupportable and they had behaved irresponsibly. So we are increasingly mindful. If you ask, is the planning system in meltdown, I think the planning system is in a state of nervousness about the consequences of making decisions which, if they go to appeal, could prove to be extremely costly, because we are all very, very conscious of the financial difficulties the council is in, and we don't want recklessly, just to appease elements of angry public opinion, we don't want to allow the council to make decisions which, when challenged, will be extremely costly. So the reason for the recall protocol is to give everybody a chance to think again about their decisions. Now, when we had the repeat of this month of that earlier decision on Severn Place, is that what it's called? I think it's called Severn Place. The officers advised us that on every ground that we had considered objecting to that development, we were in an extremely uncertain and possibly vulnerable position. And they advised us that it would not succeed at appeal. However, on the question of height, the officers wrote a perfectly good reason for the rejection of the scheme. But I'm afraid my colleagues didn't agree that that reason was sufficient to reject the whole application. But may I say, it would have only been objected. It would only have been rejected on that single ground. And the developer might have agreed just to come down a story or two, but the bulk of the application would have come back and would have had to have been approved, I think.
Okay. Councillor Espy, then.
Thanks, Chair. Well, being fairly new as a councillor, I haven't had much experience of planning, but I've been extremely disappointed by the evidence that planning officers have brought to the planning committee and the willingness they've shown to challenge applications which just seem quite bad. Well, Martin's here now, I'm sure he'll mention the Eastern Gate SPD for Severn Place, but several of the reasons seem to be strong on their own, and taken together they seem to make the application extremely weak, in my view. So the council will be hiring a new head of planning at the start of March, so they'll be interviewing for a head of planning, and I'm hopeful that they'll choose someone who has a bit of fight in them, because the cost of Wilton Terrace is extremely high, but the cost of Caradus is even higher.
Yeah, thank you. My name's Roger Chatterton. I'm chair of Brunswick North County Residents Association. And really, I suppose it's a question for Councillor Hipkin, that my understanding with the Severn Place Planning Committee was the vote split 3 and 3. Now, what I don't understand is if 3 councillors can find due grounds for refusing an application, and the other 3 councillors cannot find due grounds for it, were the grounds that the objections were, let's say it was height, are they valid or are they not? And how can 3 councillors recommend refusal of that and 3 councillors recommend acceptance? Either it can be refused on height or it can't. And the vote then went to the chair, and the chair voted in favour of the application. So I may be
bear a very little brain, but that does confuse me. And I'm easily confused on planning matters. I've seen enough of them. And I'm equally frustrated as Councillor Gillespie. The planning matter is not something that's going to disappear in a couple of years. It's going to be there for 30, 40, 50 years, long after I'm dead, thank God. But I'm speechless. I can't understand how something like that can happen.
Okay. Do you want to come back on that, Councillor Aiken?
I can understand those frustrations. I mean, my frustrations are bigger than the one which have just been expressed. I'm frustrated at what is happening to the city as a whole and the way that it's been grossly overdeveloped and how for years we've been promoting the so-called growth agenda, and it's now overtaking us to such a degree that the city is in real danger of suffering from its own success. But on this particular issue of the height of it, I'm afraid that there is just no document or planning agreement or whatever that absolutely limits the height of buildings. I mean, we've got some loose guidance on height, and one of the considerations is the context and other prominent buildings and whether it's in a conservation. I mean, there are all sorts of considerations, but there's no absolute limit. And, I didn't have, nor did the other two who voted with me on this, although we objected to the height on the basis that it was out of context and it dominated the area, and it dominated the law court on the other side. There are all sorts of what I thought were very sensible arguments. In the end, we were stymied because there is absolutely no planning requirement with respect to height. It's a matter of judgment. And may I say that the other thing about the 3-3 split is, well, when there's a 3-3 split, the chair has the casting vote, and the chair quite honourably voted the way that he had on the original vote. So there was nothing unlawful about that. The other thing to always remember is that planning is a democratic process. It's the citizens of a place making judgments about proposals to change that place. And sometimes they get it right and sometimes they get it wrong.
I'm going to take one more point on this, because I know it's an important issue to residents, but I think we have one more question, then I need to move on. So, Colin Rosenstein.
Sorry, there's a point which arose on this one, which is actually more general application, which is why I thought it was important to raise it here, and that's the transport input from the County Council on this application, which seems completely oblivious to the fact that if you start in Seven Place and you want to go across to St Matthew's Street on a bicycle, you can't. There's no provision for it. And yet, they expect some high percentage of the people living in this development to use bicycles to get in and out. They can get in, but they can't get out in that direction.
Okay. Quick comment
And
from
the
the
County
gentleman
Council
in
is
the back.
perfectly happy with this.
That's a fair point. Quick comment from the gentleman in the back, because I know you're from the cycling campaign as well, so.
Well, yes, the cycling came up with a 14-page document giving a very robust, in my view, view of how this could be rejected for exactly the grounds that Colin Rosenthal just said. But both officers and councillors ignored the point which was made in that letter that although there is an Eastern Gate planning document which says that the developments in the area should be basically providing money to fix these things, this was yet another development that didn't do that. The development in its own right doesn't have good transport connections, and in the same way that, for example, when Orchard Park was being built, that the developers proposed changes to King's Hedges Road, which are outside the scope of the development, but on the public highway, this development should have done exactly the same. It should have said, we need to change this so that we can get in and out. That was a point that no councillor, including John Hitkin, raised, and basically that, in our view, would have been perfectly robust. Again, poor advice. The related problem, I think here is that the City Council hasn't got on with actually getting a proper plan for the Eastern Gate in place. They've had this document for 4 years. There are loads and loads of developments all happening around that area, and they're all getting away with not putting any money into sorting out Newmarket Road and that area, because there isn't a document that says how we're going to spend the money. So I think one thing that desperately needs to happen is to actually get that in place so that all of these developments can actually start paying their way.
That's a fair point. I'll draw to a close on this. I would just make one personal observation, because I was at planning last week, not for this item, but for another item, and I was there when an item in relation to Queen Edith came up. And I have to say, there were members in the public seating who were very concerned in relation to the confidence that they have in the City Council to execute its obligations in relation to determining planning, because it just appeared to be very confused, complete confusion, and then people stepped out and stepped back in, and all of a sudden there's a determination in terms of that application which was different from what had been debated. And I think one of the obligations we have as councillors is to make sure that the public do have confidence in us when we take those go through those processes in determining planning, and it has to be done in a very transparent way, very transparent. So, but it is a very important issue because there's a lot of applications coming forward. Okay, with that, I've got one last question, that gentleman there. You've been waiting very well.
My name is David Crowder. I live in one place, and I'd like to go back to the question of the ice rink and fun fair.
Could I say, would it be better if, when we're coming on to that item now? So,
oh, I thought we had already...
No, we're going to do it specifically. So that was just a warm-up to get us in a good mood. Loosening them up a little. So we're now coming on to that item, and then we'll, as part of that item, I will open it up for questions from the audience. So with that, I'll bring the open forum to an end.